We hope everyone is having a great, joyous holiday season, as well as they're going to be able to travel safe. Sounds like some weather's coming into the Midwest. Hope everybody plans accordingly. And I guess today's going to be a little different angle on redefining safe, and frankly, one that I've been interested in doing a show on for quite some time. And there's no better time to do that 2 days before Christmas. While a lot of our listeners, if you can afford to watch this show on the internet, odds are you're watching it at a nice, warm house with family around. And regardless of how tough things might be with the economy like it is, we have to recognize there's always people out there who have it worse than we do. So on today's show, we're going to talk about some of our neighbors that may not have that warm house to be in for this holiday season or even any time in the near future. And also, in the past shows, we've always talked about this show isn't just for information. It's going to be a call to action like every other show, how you can involve some of the things you need to know to be involved in, and most importantly, why it is important. And it's always nice when we have a great organization who's been out there in the trenches that's a true example of what I actually preach and teach, both in the Redefining Safe world and the reentry aftercare world. There's a lot of government agencies out there. There's a lot of organizations that have meetings, and they have meetings to have more meetings about what we need to do and more meetings to talk about when we're going to do it. But it's always great when we see an organization that's already doing something. They've had a call to action more than 2 years ago, and if you can spell the word Google, it's not too hard to see that there's some great work going on at Joppa Outreach. And today we have Joe Stevens as our guest. And introduce yourself, Joe.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you. How long has Joppa Outreach been organized now?
We're in our third winter.
Well, I was just telling my wife this morning, I can't imagine how busy of a winter that would be. But, you know, when I was looking at your website about a week or so ago, and we kind of lost contact with each other through the holidays there, one thing that I really liked what I saw is, you know, when I look down here, I'm seeing that you are going to the people instead of expecting people to come to you.
Yeah, that's correct. We focus on unsheltered folks, and that means it's kind of a subset of all homeless people. The unsheltered people are those literally with no shelter. They're in tents, under bridges, living perhaps in vehicles or on the streets. And yes, we go to wherever they are, and we try to see them at least once a week.
Absolutely. And I remember 3 years ago, I think it was, I'd have to look at my calendar. I remember in a meeting, I think it was a homeless coalition meeting here in Des Moines. I remember one of the first things I heard you say was the fact there's a huge difference between people who are unsheltered and homeless. And, you know, yes, of course, we have a lot of people out there who may be living with a family or friend because they've lost their home or whatever, and we certainly want to be able to help them. And I see that you kind of bridge that and focusing on the fact that if someone is in that position, maybe we can help them to not end up unsheltered and homeless, but also you really are out there under the bridges and in the doorways. I like that.
You know, it's very rewarding. These the people that we serve don't have a lot of visits each week, and so to spend time with them and like you would with any friend is very meaningful for them, and it's actually quite rewarding for us too and our volunteers.
Absolutely. And just kind of continuing on that thread, I was looking through your website, and for people who are not familiar with Joppa, on our screen now for the live viewers, you can actually see your website. But also just want to bring some attention to some of the stuff you are doing, helping people acquire housing, furnishings, IDs, transportations, and jobs. There's so many things that we take for granted in a world where we, you know, want to connect by Facebook and social networking and all these things that we just don't recognize the fact that someone who is basically struggling to live a daily basis, those things are actually they're a necessity they don't have.
You know, it's really true. We're so blessed in America, and we just take so many things. I know I do take so many things for granted, and it's just when you think about having simple things like a roof over your head and heat, and you know, friends, loved ones. Those are in family. Those are things that that some of the folks that we serve just haven't experienced for years.
Absolutely, and in fact, it's As humans amaze me. I always make the sarcastic joke that the world is a great place, and we went and filled it full of people, and once we filled it full of people, that's when things really started to come unwired. But, it kind of amazes me. If you think back, we're here in the Midwest, and your old time back, a little over 100 years, if someone was in a Conestoga wagon headed west, living underneath the wagon, living off the land, we actually look back on that. We always remember history more fondly than it was. Those folks were struggling as well.
Yeah.
But they're also what made part of our history. But at the same time, the perception of the public in which our frontiermen lived in was actually that of respect. Where today, if someone doesn't have a car, an address, a cell phone, a Facebook account, and so on, basically society pretends they're not there.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. The same thing's true of some of the mountain men and folks that would live off the land. We look back at those people with fondness as well, and yet folks that want to live off the land today, and there are a few of those that literally choose to be out there and don't really. Those few don't really want to be called homeless and don't think of themselves as homeless, and they are just out there living off the land. We might call them off the grid or something, but that is a very small percentage of the folks that are out there that would choose to be in that environment. But yes, the resiliency is amazing of people and how they can survive in this weather. It just never ceases to amaze me.
Absolutely. And, the human instinct to survive is one of the reasons why I'm very proactive about promoting organizations like yours, and just the fact that sometimes when people do things to survive, sometimes it might be have some legal ramifications just simply because people will try to survive. Other times, we just don't. There's too many walls and too many barriers, including language barriers. And when I see on your website and heard you speak before and also know a few of your volunteers, the one thing that can bridge where somebody is to the world they need to be is humans and relationships and the mentorship programs where someone feels like they have an identity. And another reason my hat's off to you, because you just described it. You describe people as individuals, whether it's the small percentage of people who choose to live in that environment, or it's the larger percent of people that just some overwhelming things has happened in life and they're where they are, but the world they live in isn't very accepting of the change that they need to make happen until organizations like yours come along and have enough mentors that you create an environment for that change.
Yeah, it is. It's tough for folks out there that have lost their self-esteem. A lot of people are just very, very embarrassed by their homelessness or by how they got into the situation they're in. We have folks with master's degrees that are homeless, and just never thought they'd be homeless. And one gentleman was I like to tell his story because he was about 56 and he'd been a finishing carpenter all his life. And one day he got dizzy up on a ladder and blacked out and fell. And that happened a second time. Went to the doctor each time, and they just couldn't figure out what was going on with him. And his boss, his employer, was concerned about the customers and the liability, and said, if we can't figure this out, and it happens again, I can't have you up on ladders. I'm going to have to let you go. And it did happen again, and he was let go, and he lost his insurance, and he ended up out in a tent, and he'd been conducting Bible studies at his church. He was a Sunday school leader, and then 6 months later had raised 6 kids, had been through a divorce, so he didn't have an immediate support system within his home. But he was just so embarrassed by his homelessness, and he couldn't bring himself to call his kids. Mm-hmm. They had places he could go live, and in fact, one of them had invited him to come live with them to meet his new grandkids, and he was not contacting his family because he was so embarrassed. And so the whole key with him, and when you go to help someone end their homelessness, it's always different in each situation. You've got to zoom in and understand the specifics. And sometimes for him it was just a mental hurdle. He's perfectly good health. It turned out he had Meniere's disease, which affects your equilibrium. And but he didn't find out until quite a bit later. But once we understood all that, we were able to help him get in touch with his family in a way that he was comfortable with, and then we were able to put him on a bus, and the next thing we knew, he was calling back and had 6 grandkids on his lap, a couple of which he had never met before, and he was crying. He was just so full of joy. So, yeah, it's the self-esteem thing, and folks just, they look down, and, the best thing you can do for a homeless person is to acknowledge them and to say hi. You see somebody on the street corner, just say hi.